Hello, welcome to a screencast aimed at improving your EP grade for OCR A-Level Linear PE. This is the second of a few screencasts breaking down each section of the EP, and in this video we're going to be discussing how to analyse tactics in relation to the EP discussion. The assessor is going to ask you to explain strengths and weaknesses of tactics of the performance that you've observed, either live or through a video. You therefore need to think about the following to craft your response. What tactic did you see the performer use individually? And how did this affect the overall team performance? We use these two factors when discussing any team-based sport such as football, netball, rugby. So for example, an individual tactic you could see the performer use might be something like zonal marking or man-to-man marking, or it might be they've accelerated past a player, or they've deliberately picked on a weaker player in the opposition and they've targeted them in an attacking sequence. For an individual sport, the process is exactly the same. However, you then just need to relate it to the actual individual performance. So if we're talking athletics, for example, if we're talking 1500 metres, it could be that you saw the 1500 metre athlete deliberately wait and jog to the back of the pack as he's running the 1500 metres. It might be that they wanted to deliberately do that because they had a faster opponent. What did that mean for the individual's performance? Well, that means that at the last lap of the race, they had more energy to run that last lap and therefore could accelerate past any other performer, improving their performance in the overall event. Just to remind you, when you're talking about the tactics, you should be aiming to have a minimum of 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses, depending on the time allowed for your EP performance, but that's a minimum guide. So here's some examples then. So if we're talking about a team, so I'm watching a team-based game such as football, cricket, etc., etc. Let's use this as an example. A strength of the player I observed in football was the use of a lofted pass regularly to switch play, especially when they noticed the wingers for their own side were in open spaces. This was a very effective tactic for the team, as it meant that when it occurred, the defending team were busy pressing in certain areas, often on one side, and it meant the player was clever enough and intelligent enough to move the ball very quickly to the opposing side, and it gave the team a very quick outlet for some form of counter-attack or quick attack around the back of the defending team. If we're talking individual sports, here's another example for strengths. A strength of the individual long jumper was that they spent time calculating their stride length run-up prior to their final attempt, and so you often saw the runner adjusting their stride length as the event was going on. What this meant was that in their final long jump attempt, they had a far greater distance covered because their feet placement landed correctly on the board. And therefore, they were very effective at using that specific tactic of calculating the stride length so they could maximise power when their foot hit the board. Again, going back to teams, here's an example of a weakness for a particular team. A weakness for the basketball player was their individual man-to-man marking. The player that I observed didn't realise his opponent was quite skilled with the ball in his hands and was often therefore too close when pressing. This meant that the attacking player he was playing against always beat him with the ball in a 1v1 situation, and therefore meant that the rest of his remaining teammates had to respond by dragging a second defender out and this created overall problems with their entire strategy of man-to-man marking and pressing the opposing team. Again, a weakness of a tactic for an individual-based sport would be as follows. A weakness of the golfer I observed was that they were not confident in their club selection when using irons on approaching the green. They were repeatedly using a higher iron as they had not accounted for the power they were generating in each approach shot. This meant that the fairway to green approaches were more often overhit, and the player would take more shots per hole due to having to recover the overhit approach shot. Now, as per the skills section I recently uploaded to YouTube, we'd recommend a minimum of 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses, as I mentioned earlier on. For your tactics analysis, this is always dependent on how much time your assessor within your college or your educational institution has given you for the EP assessment. Okay, hopefully that's helped you a little bit with the tactics aspect of the EP for OCR A-Level Linear PE. If you need any help with any other aspect, please visit the IspeakPE YouTube channel. And thanks again for watching.